In the relentless chaos of modern existence, our minds have become battlefields where clarity dies 1,000 deaths each day. We are overwhelmed by endless notifications, paralyzed by infinite choices, and tormented by thoughts that spiral beyond our control. The ancient art of clear thinking seems lost to us, buried beneath layers of anxiety, distraction, and emotional turbulence. Yet nearly 2,000 years ago, a Roman emperor faced similar challenges to our own. Marcus Aurelius, ruler of the most powerful empire in history, discovered that true strength comes not from commanding armies or conquering territories, but from mastering the fortress of one's own mind. His personal journal, known to us as Meditations, reveals the profound Stoic principles that transformed him from a man burdened by immense responsibility into a beacon of philosophical clarity. Today, these timeless insights offer us a path back to mental discipline, emotional stability, and the kind of crystalline thinking that cuts through the fog of modern confusion like a sword through silk. The foundation of clear thinking begins with a revolutionary recognition that Marcus Aurelius understood deeply. You are not your thoughts, and you are not required to believe everything your mind tells you. In his Meditations, he reminds himself that you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This simple yet profound distinction becomes the cornerstone of mental clarity. When we observe our thoughts as temporary visitors rather than permanent residents, we create space between stimulus and response. The anxious thought that races through your mind at 3 in the morning is not you speaking. It is simply mental weather passing through the sky of consciousness. Marcus understood that the emperor who could govern millions must first learn to govern the territory of his own thinking, recognizing that thoughts arise and pass away like clouds, and we possess the sovereign power to choose which ones deserve our attention and which ones we allow to dissolve into the vastness of awareness. True clarity emerges when we learn to separate what we can control from what we cannot, a distinction that Epictetus called the fundamental principle of philosophy and that Marcus Aurelius practiced daily. The Stoics understood that human suffering comes primarily from our attempts to control the uncontrollable while neglecting the very things that lie within our power. Marcus writes, "Confine yourself to the present, understanding that the present moment is the only arena where our power truly exists." We cannot control the weather, other people's opinions, the economy, or even our own mortality, but we possess absolute sovereignty over our responses, our choices, our attention, and our character. This recognition brings immediate relief to the cluttered mind because it eliminates the exhausting mental energy we waste trying to manage the universe. When you stop trying to control your colleague's mood, your partner's decisions, or tomorrow's uncertainties, you suddenly have vast reserves of mental energy available for the work that actually matters, shaping your own thoughts, responses, and actions with the precision of a master craftsman. The practice of seeing things as they truly are, without the distortions of emotion or interpretation, stands as one of Marcus Aurelius's most powerful tools for mental clarity. He constantly reminds himself to strip away the stories, judgments, and emotional colorings that cloud objective perception. How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, Marcus observes, recognizing that most of our mental turbulence comes from interpretations rather than facts. When someone criticizes you, the fact is simply that certain words were spoken. The interpretation that you are worthless or under attack exists only in your mind. The Stoic practice of objective representation involves describing events in their most basic, factual terms, removing the emotional charge that transforms molehills into mountains. Instead of thinking, "This terrible thing happened to me," practice saying, "This event occurred." Instead of "He deliberately hurt me," try "He acted in a way that I found unpleasant." This subtle shift in language creates profound shifts in emotional experience, allowing you to respond from a place of clarity rather than reactivity. Marcus Aurelius understood that emotions, while natural and human, must not be allowed to hijack the throne of reason. He writes, "You can commit injustice by doing nothing," recognizing that emotional reactions often prevent us from taking appropriate action. The Stoic approach to emotions is not suppression or denial, but rather acknowledgement without identification. You can feel anger without becoming an angry person. You can experience fear without letting fear make your decisions. Marcus practiced what we might call emotional aikido, using the energy of emotions without being overwhelmed by them. When anger arises, he would examine it. What is this anger trying to tell me? Is there a legitimate need for action here, or is this simply my ego feeling threatened? By creating space between the emotion and the response, Marcus maintained his capacity for clear judgment, even in the most challenging circumstances. This emotional regulation becomes the bedrock of clear thinking because decisions made from emotional reactivity are almost always inferior to decisions made from calm assessment. The discipline of stillness, which Marcus Aurelius cultivated through daily reflection and philosophical contemplation, provides the mental spaciousness necessary for clear thinking to emerge. In our hyper-connected world, we have lost the art of productive solitude, the kind of quiet reflection that allows wisdom to surface from beneath the constant chatter of mental activity. Marcus would rise before dawn to engage with his thoughts, examining his motivations, clarifying his values, and preparing his mind for the challenges ahead. This practice of morning reflection created what we might call mental hygiene, a daily cleansing that prevented the accumulation of unclear thinking, unprocessed emotions, and unconscious reactions. The modern mind, constantly stimulated and rarely still, loses its capacity for the deep thinking that requires silence and space. Marcus understood that just as the body needs rest to function optimally, the mind needs stillness to achieve clarity. In these moments of quiet reflection, solutions appear, priorities clarify, and the essential separates itself from the trivial with remarkable precision. The Stoic practice of negative visualization, which Marcus Aurelius employed to prepare his mind for any eventuality, serves as a powerful tool for maintaining perspective and emotional equilibrium. Rather than morbid pessimism, this practice involves mentally rehearsing potential challenges or losses to reduce their power to disturb your peace of mind. Marcus regularly contemplated his own mortality, the impermanence of his empire, and the possibility of losing everything he held dear. This practice, far from creating anxiety, actually generated profound peace because it eliminated the shock and devastation that comes from unexpected loss. When you have mentally prepared for the possibility that your business might fail, your relationship might end, or your health might decline, these events lose their power to completely destabilize your thinking. You can respond with grace and wisdom rather than panic and confusion. The person who has never contemplated loss lives in a fragile bubble that reality will eventually burst. The person who has practiced negative visualization lives with the unshakable strength that comes from accepting life's fundamental uncertainty. Marcus Aurelius recognized that our perceptions are not neutral recordings of reality, but are heavily influenced by our beliefs, expectations, and past experiences. He writes, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." This insight points to one of the most liberating discoveries in human psychology. We can change our experience of life by changing how we think about life. The same event can be interpreted as a disaster or an opportunity, a rejection or a redirection, a problem or a puzzle to solve. Marcus practiced what we might call cognitive flexibility, the ability to consider multiple interpretations of any situation and choose the most useful perspective. When faced with setbacks, he would ask not, "Why is this happening to me?" but "How can this serve my growth?" This shift in questioning transforms you from a victim of circumstances into an active participant in your own development, maintaining mental clarity even when external conditions are challenging. The cultivation of philosophical wisdom, which Marcus Aurelius pursued through constant study and reflection, provides the intellectual framework necessary for clear thinking in complex situations. The Stoic philosophers developed systematic approaches to ethics, logic, and physics that gave them tools for analyzing any situation with precision and depth. Marcus didn't just react to events. He had a comprehensive worldview that helped him understand his place in the larger scheme of existence. This philosophical foundation prevented him from being swept away by temporary emotions or immediate pressures because he could always step back and see the bigger picture. In our age of information overload, We often mistake data for wisdom, confusing the ability to access facts with the capacity to think clearly about those facts. True wisdom involves not just knowing things, but understanding how things relate to each other and to the fundamental questions of human existence. The person with philosophical depth possesses an internal compass that guides clear thinking even when external circumstances are confusing or chaotic. Marcus Aurelius understood that clear thinking requires intellectual humility, the recognition that our initial judgments might be wrong, and that truth often emerges through careful examination rather than immediate reaction. He constantly reminds himself to question his assumptions, examine his biases, and remain open to new information. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy, he writes, understanding that reactive thinking often mirrors the very patterns we claim to oppose. This intellectual humility creates space for learning and growth because it prevents the ego from defending positions simply because we have previously held them. The humble mind can admit error, change course, and integrate new understanding without feeling diminished. This flexibility of thinking becomes crucial in our rapidly changing world, where the person who clings too tightly to old ways of thinking becomes increasingly irrelevant and ineffective. The Stoic principle of focusing on process rather than outcomes provides another essential tool for maintaining mental clarity in the face of uncertainty. Marcus Aurelius understood that while we cannot control the results of our actions, we can control the quality of our efforts and the integrity of our intentions. He writes, "In the morning when thou risest unwillingly, let this thought be present, I am rising to the work of a human being." This focus on process liberates the mind from the anxiety and attachment that come from being overly invested in specific outcomes. When your happiness and self-worth depend on achieving particular results, your thinking becomes clouded by fear, desperation, and attachment. When you focus on giving your best effort while remaining detached from outcomes, your mind remains clear and your actions remain pure. This principle applies whether you're building a business, raising children, or pursuing any meaningful goal. The quality of your process matters more than the specific results you achieve. The practice of memento mori, the regular contemplation of death, served Marcus Aurelius as a clarifying force that helped him distinguish between what truly matters and what is merely urgent or dramatic. When you regularly remember that your time is limited and that death comes to everyone, the petty concerns that normally consume mental energy lose their power to disturb your peace. Marcus writes, "It is not death that a man should fear, but never beginning to live." This awareness of mortality doesn't create morbid depression, but rather joyful urgency. The recognition that every moment is precious and should not be wasted on unclear thinking, unnecessary conflicts, or meaningless pursuits. The person who truly understands their mortality thinks with remarkable clarity about priorities, relationships, and the legacy they want to leave behind. Marcus Aurelius discovered that clear thinking requires the discipline of examining our motivations honestly, stripping away the self-deceptions and rationalizations that cloud our judgment. He regularly questioned whether his actions were driven by wisdom or ego, by genuine concern for others, or by hidden self-interest. This practice of motivational honesty prevents the kind of self-serving thinking that leads to poor decisions and damaged relationships. When you're honest about your motivations, you can address them directly rather than being unconsciously controlled by them. The person who claims to be helping others while actually seeking recognition can modify their approach once they acknowledge their true motivation. The person who remains unconscious of their ego-driven agenda will continue to create problems while wondering why their good intentions aren't producing good results. The Stoic understanding of interdependence, which Marcus Aurelius expressed through his recognition that we were born to work together, provides a framework for thinking clearly about relationships and social responsibilities. Rather than the isolated individualism that characterizes much modern thinking, the Stoics understood that human flourishing is inherently social, and that clear thinking must account for our connections to others. Marcus writes, "What is not good for the swarm is not good for the bee." This perspective helps us think beyond narrow self-interest, while avoiding the trap of sacrificing our own well-being for others' approval. Clear thinking about relationships involves understanding both our individual needs and our social responsibilities, finding ways to contribute to the common good while maintaining our own integrity and boundaries. The cultivation of gratitude, which Marcus Aurelius practiced daily, serves as a powerful antidote to the kind of negative thinking that clouds judgment and creates unnecessary suffering. Rather than focusing on what's missing, broken, or disappointing, the grateful mind recognizes the abundance that already exists. Marcus regularly reminded himself of the gifts he had received: life itself, consciousness, the capacity to reason, relationships with others, and the opportunity to serve something greater than himself. This practice of active gratitude doesn't ignore genuine problems or promote passive acceptance of injustice, but it prevents the kind of chronic dissatisfaction that makes clear thinking impossible. The grateful mind operates from a foundation of abundance rather than scarcity, leading to more generous and creative solutions to life's challenges. Marcus Aurelius understood that clear thinking requires the courage to face difficult truths rather than taking refuge in comfortable illusions. He regularly confronted his own mortality, the impermanence of his achievements, and the possibility that his efforts might not produce the results he hoped for. This unflinching honesty with reality, rather than creating despair, actually generates tremendous peace because it eliminates the exhausting mental energy we spend maintaining false hopes and unrealistic expectations. The person who can face truth directly has nothing to fear from reality and can respond to circumstances with wisdom rather than wishful thinking. This courage to see clearly extends to all areas of life: relationships, career, health, and personal growth. Clear thinking requires the willingness to see what is actually happening rather than what we wish were happening. The Stoic practice of evening reflection, which Marcus Aurelius used to review his thoughts, actions, and reactions from each day, provides a systematic approach to improving the quality of our thinking over time. Each evening, he would examine his behavior. Where did I act from wisdom, and where did I act from emotion? What did I learn about myself today? How can I think more clearly tomorrow? This practice of daily self-examination creates a feedback loop that continuously improves mental clarity. Without regular reflection, we repeat the same thinking patterns and make the same errors indefinitely. With consistent self-examination, we can identify our mental habits, strengthen our cognitive abilities, and gradually develop the kind of clear thinking that becomes second nature. The final insight that Marcus Aurelius offers for thinking clearly involves the recognition that this work is never finished, that mental clarity is not a destination, but a way of traveling through life. He understood that the human mind, like the body, requires daily exercise and maintenance to function optimally. The practices that create clear thinking must be renewed each day. The separation of perception from interpretation, the focus on what we can control, the cultivation of emotional regulation, and the maintenance of philosophical perspective. Marcus didn't achieve perfect clarity once and then coast on that achievement. He worked on his thinking every day until his death, understanding that this daily practice was itself the point. The goal is not to become a person who thinks clearly, but to become a person who is committed to the ongoing work of thinking clearly. In a world that profits from your confusion, choosing to think clearly becomes an act of rebellion. Marcus Aurelius shows us that this rebellion begins not with changing external circumstances, but with transforming the landscape of our own minds. The same mental tools that helped a Roman emperor govern an empire can help you govern your own life with wisdom, grace, and unshakable inner peace. The path is not easy. It requires daily discipline, honest self-examination, and the courage to face reality without flinching. But the rewards are beyond measure. A mind that remains calm in chaos, clear in confusion, and strong in the face of any challenge life can offer. Begin today. Begin with this moment. Begin with the next thought that enters your awareness, and choose to meet it with the clarity and wisdom of a philosopher-emperor. Your future self will thank you for the gift of a well-trained mind.